the oldest graveyards in the country. You can find that off the Freedom Trail over by Boston Common. That's where Sam Adams is buried, Paul Revere, John Hancock, victims of the Boston Massacre. So what I'm trying to say is with a couple bucks, you're helping out some awesome kids, some entrepreneurs, and some dead dudes. So just make a donation. That's pretty much all I got. If you guys want to take pictures on the tour today, take as many as you want. The only thing I ask, just stay with the group. Don't wander off from the tour, okay guys? This is an active brewing facility. We have forklifts moving around, dangerous equipment, dangerous chemicals back there. So basically we'll just stay together and stay safe today. So as we head down this tunnel and get started, if you can just have that winter lager ticket out that we gave you, just have that out and show it to my buddy Keith at the end of the tunnel. He just needs to make sure everybody's checked in and got one of those. So guys, welcome to the brewery. Follow me right this way. Show that ticket to Keith, guys. Alright, great. And guys, you want to take just a few steps forward? We got some more guys coming in. Thanks, I appreciate that. More people. Alright, great. So, pretty much looks like everybody made it. So guys, here's the good news. You're not at work, you're not at school, so you're at a brewery on Tuesday afternoon. That means you're going to have a good time. You're going to drink some beer. But I can't just give you the beer. I have to give you a tour first. So the first thing we're going to do today is talk about some of the basic ingredients in our beers. I'm going to pass out some samples of these ingredients. The next stop's going to be the brew house. And then we're going to wrap this whole tour up in the tasting rooms and try a few beers today. So I'm going to get right into it, guys. The first ingredient we're going to talk about today is malted grain. Talk about that first, because malted grain is almost like the backbone of your beers. That's providing your beers with colors, flavors, body. It's also producing these fermentable sugars you can feed to yeast later on in this brew process, and yeast eats and converts over to alcohol and CO2. And whenever you're talking about malted grain in beer, a lot of times you're going to be talking about malted barley, but we also brew with malted wheat, malted rye, malted oats sometimes. For the most part, it's malted barley though. Like when you go to make Boston Lager, that's our flagship beer here at this brewery. Boston Lager is like half our sales each year. You're going to use strictly malted barley when you brew that beer, guys. And what I mean by malted barley, for the barley to be malted, that's just a process you put the grain through. So almost all this grain comes from the Northwest, Midwest, US, and it gets malted out there as well. So in the case of malting barley, what you do, take kernels from the barley plant, soak that in some warm water. What that does is sort of activate the enzymes in the grain. Like essentially, the warm water fools that kernel of barley into thinking that it's spring. So the kernel starts to grow and sprout and create sugars for energy. But you don't need a full germination process, so you stop that by drying out the malt, and then depending on how you choose to roast the malt, that's going to get you all these different colors and different flavors in the beer. So it's easier if I just show you a few varieties of malt we brew with, and this is a nice spectrum in terms of how we go about roasting it. So the first sample I'm going to show you today is our Caramel 60 malt. So Caramel 60 or C60 is roughly 10% of the malted barley in our Boston Lager. So 10% of our flagship beer is grain bill in this first sample. And it's a good example of some grain that's gone through a medium roasting process. So this small portion of C60 in Boston Lager, this is what's really going to get you that amber color in Boston Lager. Not to mention some sweeter notes like caramel and toffee coming off this first grain. So I'm going to pass this out. It's totally edible. In fact, some of you guys might think C60 tastes a little like grape nut cereal, if you've ever had that before. That's because this is like the main ingredient in that cereal. I don't think anybody eats it anymore, but anyways, this is the first sample, and when you guys are done with these samples, just put them on a flat surface and we'll collect them later. So So that's 10% of the grain in a Boston Lager. The other 90% of the grain in that beer is a base malt called pale malt. We use this across the board here at Sam Adams. And you guys are going to be able to tell once I pass it out. We didn't roast this as heavily as the first sample. You can tell just by its color, its texture, its flavor. This second one's going to be a lot sweeter than that first one I passed out. But guys, pale malt is going to get you a lot less on the color side of a Boston Lager. But this is going to provide your beer with a lot of body, a lot of fermentable sugars for this brew process. So not only do we call this a base malt, we'll call it a primer malt, a canvas malt, meaning, you know, start with this to get body, to get your fermentable sugars through the process. Then use a malt like that first one, Caramel 60, to start imparting some different colors and flavors from the malt. So just going to pass out the second one. It's more like a base malt. And guys, keep in mind, these are the only snacks I'm going to be passing out on the tour today, so you know, if you skip the continental breakfast or lunch, here's your shot. So the last malt I got for you today, it's a little bit different. This last one's called chocolate malt, and you know, before anybody gets too excited about that, it doesn't really taste like a Hershey bar. It's going to translate more into like a coffee bean, espresso bean flavor when you brew with it. Like this last one, it's a great example of some grain that goes through the most extreme roasting process, almost to the point of being burnt. So I recommend just trying a couple of these when they go around. Go easy. It kind of tastes like burnt toast, burnt popcorn, but guys, this will get you the darker styles of beer, and this will impart roasted flavor in darker styles, right? Alright, great. So guys, just to recap grain real quick, when I first say grain affected the body of the beer, all I meant by that was when you go into this process of brewing and you use a large quantity of grain, you get bigger beers, heavier body beers. When you use less grain, you get lighter styles, lighter body beers. When I say grain affected the color and flavor of the beer, that's really just tied into how you go about roasting it and preparing it. And then when you steep this grain in some warm water, you produce these simple sugars that you can feed to yeast later on. Yeast eats and converts over to alcohol and CO2. So this is sort of like the backbone of your beer. How you guys feeling about grain today? Pretty good? Woo! You guys are really excited about it. So anyways, guys, the next ingredient is a little more interesting. It's the hops. And hops are sort of like the spice in the beer. They're going to give your beer a lot of flavor and a lot of aroma. The hops are also going to be a nice bittering agent for the beer to balance out all the sweetness you can get from your malted grain potentially. Alright, so the particular hop we're going to look at today is a variety called Hallertau Mittelfrüh. This hop is grown in southern Germany. It's a very aromatic hop. This is a signature hop in our Boston Lager. So when we're in the tasting room today, and you have Boston Lager sitting in front of you, if you smell it, it's going to smell a little piney, a little citrusy, kind of floral. All that aroma on Boston Lagers come from the hops we brew with in that beer. Not to mention all the bitterness, too. So guys, we're going to be looking at hops in the flower form today. Hops, they're like a climbing plant, like a vine. They'll grow up a trellis, they'll get pretty tall. This variety we're looking at, Hallertau Mittelfrüh, gets like 30 feet tall. But typically when we brew with hops, we're going to have the hops in a pelletized form, okay? But guys, kind of the key to this whole thing, if you take a few of these hop flowers and you just start to tear them open, break them apart, you're going to notice they're filled with a bunch of little yellow dust inside of them. It kind of looks like pollen. So this pollen-like substance in the hop is a gland in the hop that produces pretty much all of its aroma and its flavor. So what we're actually trying to do in a hop selection is we're trying to activate this gland I'm talking about so you can bring out the aroma of the hops. And the reason why you want to do that, guys, is because aroma, it's got a lot to do with what you perceive as flavor in the beer. So the way we sample hops is pretty easy. We take a nice handful of them, we crush them up in between our hands, and the heat and friction from doing this is going to help release some oil and resin from that gland I mentioned, and it's going to get your hands a little sticky. That's supposed to happen, and once you're done crushing up these hops, it's pretty simple. All you guys got to do is just smell your hands. Okay, so it's kind of piney, citrusy, floral, spicy, earthy. It's going to smell like whatever you think it smells like, and that's going to have a lot to do with what you perceive as flavor in the beer. So I'm going to pass these out. Feel free to make a mess, guys. That's why we came over here. This ingredient's just for smelling, so eat none of these. They pretty much taste like pine cones. So guys, we don't just strictly brew with German-grown hops. We're using American-grown hops, English hops, Australian varieties, Czech varieties, English-grown hops. I mean, the main difference between all the hops we use is really the region they come from. Like, each region, it's got different soils and different climate, and that's going to get you this wide range of characteristics in hops, sort of like grape plants out there.
Well, before you guys, Miss gonna have some. Thank you. for a sec. Don't turn it off. Oh, it smells nice.
Alright, great guys. Getting that piney aroma I was talking about, or some type of aroma? You can just nod your heads.
It smells like, yeah, like the beer.
And guys, don't worry about that sticky residue. I promise that dissipates by the weekend, so don't worry about that. We'll be okay. Guys, the next ingredient, I'm going to keep it moving. Next ingredient's pretty clear cut. It's water. I'm not going to make you guys try water because you know what it is. It makes beer wet. What's more important about water is your water source. You have to have a good source that's consistent, that's clean. The water source we use here at this brewery is the Quabbin Reservoir. That's out in sort of the western part of Massachusetts if you live here. That's probably where you get your drinking water from. But guys, this isn't the only brewery Sam operates. We have 2 other facilities and they're a lot bigger than this one we're in today. We have a brewery in Cincinnati. We also have one near Allentown, Pennsylvania. All right, so we're also going to go ahead and use clean local water sources at those breweries. The only difference, there's a scientist or a chemist on site at those places whose job it is to make sure that the water they're brewing with down there is like the water that we brew with up here in Boston, the same water we've been using since the 80s, Boston tap water. So they look to balance pH level, mineral content of the water they're using down there, and that's for consistency in the product, guys. Water's like 90% of what your beer is, so you're going to be able to tell the difference if you use a different water source at different breweries, okay? One last ingredient to go over here, guys. Probably the most important ingredient, it's yeast. Because without yeast, you're not going to get any alcohol in the beer. You're also going to miss out on some of the carbonation it gets you naturally during fermentation. Not to mention yeast can throw some flavor into the mix too. So yeast, it's a living organism. It's tiny, it's single-celled, it's a type of fungus. And guys, whenever you start to make beer, like say you're going to make Boston Lager, our flagship beer, first step making that beer is easy. You just start off with the grain I showed you in these first 2 barrels, C60 and pale malt. You crush up that grain and expose its sugars and add warm water to it. So the warm water, what that does is reactivate the enzymes in the grain. And enzymes, they break down starches in the grain into these fermentable sugars. Basically simple sugars that yeast, a living organism, can eat during fermentation and convert over to alcohol and CO2. But you can get some flavor from yeast. It's really just dependent on the variety of yeast you're going to use, the type of yeast. I'll give you the classic example, guys. If you've ever tried a Hefeweizen before, that's a German wheat style beer, pretty popular in the summertime. Or if you've ever tried a Dunkelweizen, that's a darker German wheat style beer you're going to see in the fall. Those 2 styles, you're going to pick up on a lot of clove notes, banana notes when you drink them, maybe even a bubblegum flavor. It's not because you brewed with any of that type of stuff, it's because you used a type of yeast strand that gave off that type of flavor in the beer. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of different ways to impart flavor into craft beer. And we just covered the traditional ingredients. We didn't talk about brewing spices, fruit and citrus elements, and we haven't even gone over brewing techniques yet. So there's a lot of different ways to get the flavor into these beers. Alright, great. Any questions about ingredients? You guys good?
Excellent. Any breweries outside of the States?
For Sam Adams, I'm not clear on that exactly. Like, I think they might be brewing it somehow over in England, but for the most part, we're only about 1% of all the beer in the US, so we're not really a huge international company. We almost have to worry about getting beer on the shelves in this country first. So guys, if you want to turn around, you're going to see Keith. He's going to lead you into the brew house. Meet you right over there. No problem. Guys, welcome to the Sam Adams Brew House. As you take a look around the brew house right now, you might be wondering, is this the whole brewing operation we have here? It pretty much is. Alright, of the 3 breweries I mentioned before for this company, This one here in Boston is definitely the smallest. It's also the original brewery for this company. Like, this would have been an adequate size setup for our owner, Jim Cook, back in the late 80s to brew Boston Lager on a regional scale, on a city scale. But as the brand grew, so did our space. So think of those other two breweries I mentioned before, the one in Cincinnati, the one near Allentown, Pennsylvania. Those are more like our production facilities, bottling facilities. Think of the one we're standing in right now. It's more like a research and development center, like home base for Sam Adams. Like, this brew house almost acts like a test kitchen. Like, practically every style of Sam Adams you've ever tried, that beer's recipe was born in here. That beer was tested and analyzed in the labs on site. And we put that beer through a taste panel with a bunch of sensory experts here. So I wanted to give you kind of a quick crash course in brewing, explain how this setup works and how we use it to brew some beer up. And I'm just going to use Boston Lager as a quick example as I run you through this equipment, just because that is our flagship beer. We make it half the time. I showed you some of the ingredients in that beer, and we're going to focus on that beer a lot in the tasting room. So let's talk about how we make it. Guys, the first step making Boston Lager in this brew house is pretty simple. You start off with the grain I showed you in the first two barrels today, Caramel 60 and Pale Malt. You crush up that grain in the malt room, which is about 200 feet from here. But you're going to transfer all that malted grain into this brew house using this blue pipe up here right beneath the ceiling. That's how grain gets around the building. There's a conveyor belt inside that blue pipe that moves the grain. So basically you transfer all your malted barley into your first two vessels in the process of making Boston Lager. And guys, I know this is like way more interesting than everything I'm talking about. So, basically we have two vessels to start the process. We have a mash tun and a mash kettle. So the mash tun's right here, and the mash kettle's just to the right of it. They're identical. What you do is you take roughly 80% of your malted barley that's going to go into Boston Lager, and you put it into this mash tun. And you start to steep it in warm water too. And that warm water, that's reactivating the enzymes in the grain, and enzymes break down the starches of the grain into those fermentable sugars you're going to feed yeast with later. Now guys, the other 20% of this grain, we're going to do something slightly different with that when we make Boston Lager. That other 20% of the grain's going into the mash kettle. We're going to have water that's close to boiling conditions to it over there. And that's going to do way different things to the sugars getting released in the kettle. Like, in more extreme temperatures in the liquid, the sugars coming off the grain are coming out longer, more complex, bigger chains of sugars. These are the sugars that are harder for yeast to break down when you get to fermentation and fully digest. So, at the higher temperatures on that smaller portion of grain in the kettle, what you're really doing is creating residual sugars that hang around when it's all said and done. They give Boston Lager some more body, some more mouthfeel, some more flavor. And what we do at this stage of the process is we take that small portion of grain that we heat to boiling conditions, and we spike it into the mash tun where we have about 80% of our malted barley sitting in water that's about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So what that does is raise the overall temperature of the liquid inside that original tank, and that's what's going to get you like all these different sizes of sugars and really different layers of sweetness in Boston Lager. And everything I just went over in those first two tanks, guys, is a brew process, brewing technique called decoction mashing. That was just a really, really long way of saying that we take different portions of grain and add different temperatures of water to them. And it gets you more depth and complexity on the malt side of the beer, the sweet side of it. But what you're ultimately left here with, once you're adding a bunch of warm water to the grain, you're winding up with a substance called mash, which kind of looks like oatmeal. It's a big wet clump of grain. What you need to do at this stage is remove the liquid from the mash. So we bump the mash over to this tank with the blue motor on the top of it. That's called the ladder tun. The ladder tun pretty much acts like a big strainer, guys. So you pump the mash in there. It gets turned around by a couple mechanisms that sort of loosens it up. The entire time you're doing that, you also have gravity working to your advantage as well. So automatically, this liquid in the mash starts to seep towards the bottom of this big clump, and it seeps through a false bottom as well in the ladder tun. So all that liquid is going to get sort of pushed and strained through that false bottom with the weight of the grain and gravity working to your advantage. So, guys, that liquid you remove from the mash is the precursor to beer. That liquid's called wort. It's a liquid with sugars in it. You're going to need that. All the solid stuff you leave behind in the ladder tun is called spent grain. That's mash minus the liquid we just took out. Spent grain's out of the brew process. We put it into a spent grain holding tank. We have a couple sets of farmers that swing by, pick that stuff up, reuse it to feed livestock. So anyways, that wort that you remove from the mash, that liquid, the precursor to beer, what we have to do now when we make Boston Lager is boil that liquid up for about 90 minutes, and we use a brew kettle to do that. So our brew kettle's on the back side of this platform, next to these brewers. It's a little hidden. If you can't see the brew kettle, it looks exactly like the mash tun. This equipment kind of looks the same. So we boil Boston Lager right up for 90 minutes back there. 3 different stages of that boil, we start to introduce hops. Depending on when you do that during the boil, it does very different things to the flavor outcome of Boston Lager. So, for example, very early on in that 90-minute boil, the hops you're putting in, mostly getting you the bitterness in Boston Lager. The hops towards the end of the boil in the last 10 minutes or so, mostly affecting the hop aroma in the beer. The aroma's going to boil off pretty early if you want to capture aroma from the hops at this stage, you have to concentrate hops towards the end of the boil. The way we inject hops into the brew kettle is by using hop injectors. I just point one out. It's a glass cylinder. You fill this up with hop pellets. You cycle that boiling hot wort from that brew kettle through this cylinder, through those pellets, and then essentially cycle that hot spike wort back into the brew kettle. It's also worth mentioning the 90-minute boil is going to kill off any wild yeast, bacteria that could run in the batch, anything that could give Boston Lager an off flavor down the line. Like if you guys come from a country where it's not safe to drink the local water, then you probably know if they're making local beer, you're going to survive. You know, beer goes through these long boils. It has alcohol in it. There's nothing in beer that can get you sick. It's just when you drink too much beer. So sometimes it's going to get you sick. Few more steps before you have fermentation. We're going to crash the temperature of this liquid down to 50 degrees and we're going to filter this liquid. So we'll actually filter first. We'll do that in the whirlpool. The whirlpool's right here. Pretty much acts like a centrifuge. So you pump your hot spike wort out of the brew kettle with some serious force behind it, and you create like a liquid tornado inside that whirlpool. From all that spitting about the residue collects at the bottom in a cone shape, a lot of hot residue, some other stuff. The type of stuff that's going to cloud up a Boston Lager, make it chunky, and it's a fully filtered beer, guys. So when you're in the taste room today, you shouldn't see anything left floating around in Boston Lager. You can see it except for its bubbles. All right. So there's just one last step before we start fermentation. You have to crash the temperature of this wort down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature at which you can take this lager yeast, a living organism, stick it into that wort, and it can start to thrive in that environment, reproduce, eat sugars, make beer. And yeast is a living organism, so you can't just take it and throw it into a boiling hot liquid. It dies, just like lobsters do. So what we have to do is crash the temperature down to 50 degrees, and then the yeast can thrive in that. So we use a heat exchanger to do that. Once we have 50 degrees, that's our magic number. We go ahead and pitch the yeast in the wort and start fermentation. So guys, I know that sounds like a lot of steps to get the fermentation, but everything I just went over there on the back wall and all that equipment is roughly a half day's worth of work at the scale we brew at. We consider that sort of like the first part of the brew process. Usually the largest batch of beer we do on this system at once is about 300 gallons, and that kind of goes along with the nature of the place. Like when you're brewing mostly experimental beer, you tend to brew smaller batches when you do that, but 300 gallons is still going to be 20 kegs of beer, so that's a batch here. So we're going to move into fermentation. Fermentation tank's right here. So take Boston Lager, we're at 50 degrees, and take lager yeast, put it in this tank. And look at fermentation pretty much right away. The first thing that's going on here, within the first few hours of fermentation, lager yeast is using all the oxygen in the liquid inside the tank to reproduce. And it's a single-celled organism, so the population of yeast grows a lot. And yeast starts to feed off fermentable sugars for an energy source once the oxygen's been consumed. It's going to take our yeast, lager yeast, roughly 10 to 14 days to eat these fermentable sugars. We provided it from the grain and convert that over to alcohol and CO2. Now, once the fruit source has been converted over to alcohol and CO2, without a fruit source left, the lager yeast is going to go dormant. It's going to float to the bottom of the tank and sit down there. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take a bunch of unfermented Boston Lager wort, put it into the same tank. What that does is reawaken this yeast at the bottom. They're going to start to feed off some of those fermentables in the wort we put in there. That's going to give Boston Lager a little more alcohol, a little more CO2. So before that gets out of control and you wind up with overcarbonated Boston Lager that's like 9% ABV, what you're going to do is crash the temperature in this tank. You're going to make that yeast go dormant again, and that yeast is going to leave behind those sugars in that unfermented wort you put in there, and that's going to give Boston Lager even more body, even more like texture and layers to the beer. And that's considered like a secondary fermentation, guys. That's a perfect example of a craft brewing technique. It's an extra technique that slows the process down, but it's totally worth it because you get more flavor. If you want to mass produce beer and make beer in a hurry, you're not going to do this extra step. So anyways, 2 weeks in, you got beer, you got alcohol. We call it green beer at this stage. It's like a fruit that's not ripe. So we have to condition green beer for 3 more weeks. We use a conditioning tank. Conditioning tanks identical to these. Boston Lager sits in one for about 3 weeks at cool temperatures on a bed of hop pellets. And that's going to impart some additional hop aromas on the beer. But guys, conditioning is where you're going to develop a lot of flavor in Boston Lager. That beer will mature, and its colors will get a lot brighter. So after about 3 weeks conditioning, Boston Lager is simply ready to go. We put the beer into a tank at this place. So kind of put that into perspective, start to finish. It takes us 5 weeks to brew Boston Lager. Any questions, guys? What's up? Real questions. Yeah. We brew Utopias here, a slightly different process of that. It's kind of like a totally different animal, Utopias, but if you look around you, got a question about Utopias, guys. Utopias is the world's strongest naturally fermented beer. It's 29.5% ABV. It's what's conditioning in all of these bourbon barrels you see around you. It's the world's strongest naturally fermented beer at 29.5. It takes about 18 months of conditioning in that barrel to take the edge off that heat. The carbonation will dissipate. It's very full body, very sweet. It's fermented with Vermont maple syrup. It's about $200 a one pack, and we release about 8,000 to 10,000 bottles every couple of years. So you'll see again, this batch is going to get released in 2015 sometime in the fall. So you guys want to go drink some beer?
Yeah.
Seriously guys, take it easy. I know you get free beer like all the time. So anyways, when you got here today, if you got a hand stamp, that means you can drink here. That hand stamp also entitles you to a 7-ounce tasting glass. That tasting glass is free. I want you to take it home with you. Cherish it forever and ever. Think about this guy every time you drink out of it. So what we're going to do is turn around, make up these back steps, have your hand stamp out for Keith. Keith is going to give you a glass. Actually, guys, hold on a second. We just got impeccable time in the other room. So we're just going to wait for this group to pass and then show your hand stamp to Keith, and I'll see you in the tasting room.